we're all set to go.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Liz Staubach, the chair of the City of Albany IDA Governance Committee meeting. Meeting to order, and note that we have a quorum with all members of the IDA in attendance except for Chris Betson and Nancy Gunn. First item on the agenda would be to waive the reading of the minutes and accept as presented. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Now moving straight on to new business. Framework update. And Tony's here just now.
Gotta be 2 minutes late more often.
Could have theme music lined up.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
That's reserved for superheroes.
Song. Everybody
All in favor?
Aye. Next meeting, everyone come with their welcome song.
Might as well put that to you.
So first item on the agenda is project assistance and evaluation framework update. Turn it over straight to Sarah or Stefan.
We don't have this fully choreographed, so I'll open up and then turn it over to Tom. Get Sarah over here that's on the screen as well. So know that she's up there for those of you facing this way. We have been progressing through the updates to the project evaluation systems framework. You're going to hear us call that the matrix because we'll flip up because that's what we call it now. And so there are a lot of environmental changes that have happened. That will go through some of the implications of Paris and talk through some of that, how it relates to project dynamics. We've also been looking at definitions within the original framework. May need updated, some of the waste areas that may need updated, as well as the overall rules. Quite a bit of that. I do want to say by way of opener, because things are so in flux, there could be a lot of changes. So we're going to be talking about some of the definitions for community benefits points that have been structured. We may very well be in a world where we are no longer able to do a two-tiered regular pilot versus community commitment pilot. I want that to be in the back of your mind as we're going through this, that our scoring system very well may still be viable from does a project merit pilot standpoint. We may not still be talking about does it merit a solid pilot versus a better pilot. Based on the exterior environment, based on some of the legislative that are there. So I just want to make sure that that is sort of front and center as we go through this. The world shifted a little bit, and we're be adapting to that.
So we do have Sarah Woodward from WCHA here today. Sarah's going to present on the scope of work and some of the analysis that is happening behind the scenes in terms of the framework update. As the board remembers, back in the late fall of last year, we had retained WCHA to update the framework. WCHA had been involved in the original creation of the framework in 2016. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Woodworth.
Great, thanks, Tom. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. And I think I'm going to try to share my screen. And I'm just going to run through a couple of slides to explain what we're up to here. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Oh, phew, great. So here we are, we're doing the matrix evaluation and update. I worked with you all, or Kata, on the initial matrix, just the developing the matrix. And in this case, I wanted to run through sort of the scope of services for my firm. One is to analyze how market changes and public policy initiatives i.e. the affordable housing policy, impact development economics in Albany for the following land uses: residential and mixed use new construction, residential and mixed use rehab, and we're testing it with and without historic tax credits, student housing new construction, and office. So we are looking at a variety of land use types and trying to understand how changes in the market and changes in public policy are impacting feasibility, the economics of those projects. We're really here to determine whether CADA's existing assistance framework is still effective, given market and public policy changes. We are going to look at, we developed this to have a bunch of sensitivity analyses so we can kind of zero in. Nothing is one number in our world, but the way we did this before and the way we're doing it again is to really look at a variety of scenarios so that we feel comfortable that, as things change a little bit, that the assistance framework that we come up with is still relevant and meaningful to both generating city tax dollars and incenting private investment. So we then will recommend changes to CADA's existing assistance framework. Our goal here, as it was the first time around, is to support responsible planning and management of future tax dollars while growing the city's tax base by attracting and retaining investment. How we started this, I was on the team, actually, my firm was on the team that did the Impact Albany Downtown Plan. As a result of just looking at all of these numbers and markets, it was clear that it might be valuable for CADA to develop a standard assistance framework. At the time, it wasn't standard. And the intent was to enhance transparency, accountability, and predictability of the IDA's planning process. So investors would know, even before they went into the process, sort of what they could expect. And that framework, the assistance framework, was established in 2017. So about 6 years ago. And a lot has changed in 6 years. You've seen a lot of development in adaptive reuse investment. Historic tax credits have proven to be a valuable tool for adaptive reuse. When we started this, there weren't a lot of developers using the historic tax credits, and now developers are, and they see the benefit. Residential and retail rents have increased since 2016, which is a sign that your market is getting stronger. And the recent residential market analysis by Zimmerman Voke Associates concludes that the market will continue to support residential growth. So there's been, cheers to you, there's been great progress in the city of Albany as it relates to real estate investment. The factors that are incorporated into our current analysis, we do have the new market data from your recent residential and commercial market analyses. Zimmerman Voke did the residential and CBRE did the commercial. So we're putting those new numbers in. We also have updated financial assumptions given today's costs and the capital market dynamics, interest rates, et cetera. And then we have incorporated the city's new affordable housing policy. And that's what we're about in terms of our analysis. And that kind of ends my presentation in terms of an overview of what we're doing.
Maybe we can just open it up to some questions, just if there are questions from the board or the committee for Sarah. I have a couple questions.
I think one of the questions I've asked in the past, and other people have asked me more recently, is how interest rates affect development and affect our analysis.
Yeah.
They fluctuate and they have been very low, which I think is making it easy or easier to get these projects built. But how does that factor into the analysis?
The interest rates factor into the analysis in a lot of different ways. I mean, one way is we are assuming that developers will get financing, and so the debt service will be higher with the higher interest rates. And so that, that impacts your cash flow. All right. So it makes it lower because your debt service is higher. You're subtracting a higher number from your net operating income. And the other thing that's happening is it can impact the residual capitalization rate, what the value of the building is after you've held it for a period of time. That is not a linear relationship, by the way, as much as some people think it is. It is, but there's been a lot of analysis done by third parties about the impacts that the interest rates are having on cap rates. One of the tricky things that we have to be thinking about is that's what I was talking about with the sensitivity analysis, is we can run different interest rate assumptions and sort of see what happens. And it's very valuable to kind of see how returns change with just small changes in interest rates and cap rate assumptions. And so we're doing that so that we aren't fixing on one number when we know things might very well change. It could be 6 months from now, a year from now, and we have to have an assistance framework that sort of stays within the boundaries of reasonable changes that we can project. But the bottom line, to answer your question, is increasing interest rates in real estate are a problem because real estate is very highly leveraged, which means you go out and you get a bank loan. Yeah. And that just adds cost to the project.
Sarah, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about some of the kind of high-level macroeconomic trends that you're seeing, nationally, but also here within the Albany market. Some of the studies that you've done.
Well, I think I'm very impressed with how far we've come. Rents are considerably higher today than they were when we initially did the study. So it means what we're experiencing in the city of Albany is what is being experienced in a lot of cities, which is there is an interest in sort of live, work, play environments and people seeing value to being in residential, particularly in being in cities, and people are paying for it. And that is happening all across the country. There's really been a lot of value created in downtowns, particularly where there is the live, work, play sort of environment, and people, particularly millennials and boomers who are retiring, they want to be where the action is. Not all, but there is a big segment of our population and households that find real value in that. So it looks like Albany is experiencing what we're seeing in other places in the country. I think office is right now sort of, it's always been a bit of a struggle in Albany. I had to do the office market analysis in 2016 or 15 or whenever we did that impact Albany. It was some time ago, but we have a lot of older office buildings, and the office market, as you all know, is it's sort of in flux right now with the remote work movement, and it's just hard to kind of get a grip on it. And if anything, what we're seeing in other places is there's flight to quality, which is if you want to be downtown, you may not want to be. You may want to be in an older, cool building because it's cool space, but you also may want to be in newer space that has all of the amenities that you need for the new office, hot desks, great HVAC systems, lots of natural light, all that sort of thing. So nothing, and I do think that, the historic tax credit, as you all know, has been hugely valuable to your city, particularly your downtown. And I think it's been it's been very, very beneficial to see a lot of the buildings that we've seen adaptively reused. That wouldn't have happened without the historic tax credits. That's what I can think of off the top of my head, Tom, unless there's something else you'd like me to speak to.
No, I was just gonna say, like, to the point that Darius had raised about interest rates, I mean, we keep hearing that there might be an uptick and then eventually it might come down. Just welcome your thoughts in terms of where you see that market, and then also on construction costs. We've seen, I think with COVID, we've seen a huge spike in construction costs. That seems to have settled, but it seems to have settled at a higher rate than where it was previously.
Yeah, we're struggling with this in all of my projects because right now I think there's a sense that we're at the peak. We're peak at the construction cost and we're peak at the interest rate. And that's why these sensitivity analyses are valuable. I don't think we're gonna, the way we're landing with, as I discussed this with other cities and other developers, I don't think we're ever going to see I don't think we're going back to the very, very, very low interest rates. They're going to come back to where they've sort of generally been. And that's the way we're performing our projects. We're not going back to, you can get a 2.5% loan. But I do think it makes it a little bit tricky because we are in this sort of post-COVID, things are settling down world. Construction costs continue to be, I use a third-party database called Marshall and Swift. And I will just tell you what's interesting is I've been working on a couple of projects for a long time. And even Marshall and Swift changes their construction costs like every quarter. You know what I mean? It really is, it's moving all the time. I think they are coming down. But I think the labor issue is a big issue, and I'm not sure that's going away anytime soon. And my understanding is it's a lot about that as much as it is about materials. Just trying to get the labor to do the work. So we're as Tom, we're trying to put together sensitivity analyses that allow us to look at different interest rate and different construction cost assumptions to try to zero in on some place that we think seems reasonable in light of all that we know about where the market's going.
Do you have any sense of how the rental prices are in the non-large apartment building arena? Are they, for single, 2 families, 3 families, under 10 units, that those kind of apartments?
Well, I know that I have the Zimmer, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I have the Zimmerman Vogt Associates market analysis, and they deal with a variety of unit sizes in their market analysis and have specific rents for each of those unit sizes. Excuse me. I'm getting a little bit of a cold, but I don't know off the top of my head what those rents are. Sorry, I'm having a.
What we saw from that analysis and what we've been hearing anecdotally, obviously from our discussion, smaller buildings, the older buildings have been faced with those kind of demand issue. There's so much demand. That's why they've been able to look for top of market rents for units that are not necessarily obviously not new, but also not necessarily up to either. So that is something that we have to consider carrying out from the been hearing.
Any idea if that problem is being contributed to or even caused by Airbnb, the short-term market? Because I think that people have their buildings and they're not renting them out to long-term leases. Short-term rental market.
From what we can tell in terms of it, we have that studied directly, but hearing from Discover Albany, also with been a relatively new trend here. It's been slower. It won't dump you. It'll do that. It won't dump you.
We both been there.
We need to replace our chairs here, Sarah. So every once in a while you'll see like a whack-a-mole, go back. But so we don't have the direct numbers for that. It does seem like it's a relatively newer trend here compared to some stronger markets where you've seen that.
Does anyone get those figures from the companies or?
So there is a concerted effort right now, and they're actually going to bill in front of the legislature this year, I believe, trying to standardize reporting
Yeah.
from the larger companies on that, also trying to tax them at the same rates that you would tax property. In recent years, I had heard from Discover Albany, any other time that legislation had been introduced, the lobbyists for those companies and those companies themselves didn't come out against it. There were revisions to the bill this year that made it more implementable. The organizations and the lobbyist firms did start coming out with positions here. So the tagline was, I think they got it right because it was starting to get pushback on that, but I think we'll hear more about that. The next legislative session.
Just in terms of next steps.
So I want to run through before we what we've been practicing in the to us as we were going through certain areas where we're pushing we're gearing up to start dynamics on the existing projects. Great studies that we are going to continue to find bubble in the next few years. So we're going to number commercial there. We also know that there's been really an assessed value bubble recently, in particular for projects that through over the last 5 years, they're starting to burn off their 90% abatement period. So they'll start to feel the pinch. Start to make higher pilot payments. And so in this current environment, I think we're going to start to hear more from those projects. We also have been hearing locally projects that may have tried to take advantage of the variable interest rate when they come through the IDA are now scrambling to refinance because of the trends that are happening. So I do think we're going to hear more from existing projects and as we make changes to the framework, what those previously approved pilots are going to look like compared to what we're dealing with now. So these are things that we're thinking about as we start to work on crafting. In terms of new projects, as Sarah mentioned, the inclusion of zoning significant impact on revenue for the returns on projects. And so that's something is being heavily considered as we determine what level of forward through that. It's something that we share directly with the council as well. And so far we've had support from the council on to be able to offset that. We know that commercial office expiring are going to have impact on our building stock here. That also means that we have those buildings going forward. But it also will have the direct impact on their assessed values. Base assumptions for projects. We may need to have a little bit more because projects may be on the horizon of dating, but not vacant yet. They may have a significant drop in their revenue stream, which would change their existing assessed values. So those are things that we're going to be Sarah walked through interest rates and cap rates being we're really looking at directly through the financial analysis. That, but intent that is what we're saying, that there may be different equity from others. For developers who don't have a tried and true track record. In the now return competition. But the stock market is there. There has been for the last. Your investment portfolio. A little bit. So those are all trends that we're. Our next steps, which is really taking Sarah's sensitivity analysis and then starting to figure out what those pilot schedules are. Recall the last time around, we'll run 1,000, Sarah ran 1,000 different sensitivity analyses to date. We'll start playing with what those schedules start to look like. We'll run 1,000 of those and then lay those over the sensitivity analysis to be able to get to what a right size. We're questioning things like our 485A rule, the rules for 485A, which is much more difficult now than it has been. The base rule where we are currently taking a hard stance or have been in the paperwork at least on using either the current assessed value or the purchase price or pilot. The there most frequently effective deviation from our pilot structure, which is incentivizing people to overpay for properties. What we're realizing is that in the environment, everything for properties because of sort of where we are geographically so we're going to want to take a look at the base, particularly also given the softness in commercial office real estate. If those buildings are converting, they have been for the past 20 years, productive commercial office buildings that have been generating significant amount of revenue. That may stop, and so their assessed value may plummet, and their actual value may plummet. We're also looking at the minimum work per foot, seeing sort of where that looking at fixed payments versus variable payments that would come back to. We're definitely also particularly given the office piece, the definitions around what constitutes the vacant building. 100% of commercial here, that might be something for your fault of the property owner vacancy created. Yeah, and then the hardest thing right now, given all of that environment that we're going to be looking at, not project being less than they had. Because again, given if your commercial that really does change project. We allow the building to relate a lot less than they have been. How do we ensure that we those are some of those hard and fast rules that we have to push on now, given all of that is this next step where we'll straight the numbers. How we really come over all of that into
We're also doing a really deep dive. Historic tax credits. Previously, it was 45A and historic tax credits. That there is actually a reimbursement.
The historic project will start.
some potential.
Theoretically. Are condos still possible to build in the city? From a financial
The
standpoint?
short answer is yes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's a very limited market, as we saw from the Zimmerman Gold study. And there are regulatory barriers and just also cost barriers. What we thought in recent kind of projects is just the price point. We're not talking about $100,000 condos being cost. I will also say for the record, we can't do those tonight. So just to be very clear, when you get that question there. Statutorily. Sarah, anything else you want to share just from any surprises you saw or anything that jumped out that was unexpected from last time around to this time? Oh, you're on mute.
When we started the project, I was thinking we really might be able to get money back to the city because you guys have done so well from a market standpoint. You know, our rents are going up, even though construction costs have gone up too. It looked like we had some room for that. And I think this affordable housing policy has added just a whole new dimension to this, which has been fascinating. And I think, you know, it adds a big ripple, a wrinkle into the analysis. So that was sort of, I didn't know about it when we first started, and then had to build that into the model, and just seeing the implications was what it's pretty, it's significant. And so that I think is something that I wasn't expecting. But I do think, as I said, I mean, I think it's a testament to the city of Albany that we've come as far as we have in terms of rents and people really leveraging the historic tax credit. It was not like this at all in 2000 when we did the matrix, the initial matrix, the economics, and just sort of the volume of market interest and investment interest wasn't at all like it is now today. So, you know, congratulations.
We didn't just kill it at the council.
You know, well, we're evaluating what the implications are. So, I mean, it definitely makes economics more challenging, but it's a public policy move. So we'll we're figuring out how to work with it.
You talked about the success over the last several years and being measured by increase in rents. I'm assuming, and I'm a lawyer, I'm not a numbers person necessarily, that occupancy has followed suit, right? So I just from a personal experience, you know, I'm downtown, I look out my window, I see more people. I don't count them, but I do see more people. I mean, is that what you're seeing also in connection with your analysis of what's happened over the last 5 years? So not only have rents increased, but occupancy has increased also. And so the goal of a 24/7 city and more people downtown, that's all fitting together.
I think so, yeah. And I think the Zimmerman Vogt study was, you know, was very enthusiastic about that there's still much more market out there. You know, it's not like we're tapping out on growth or opportunity. I think we're just basically catching the same wave that many downtowns are experiencing, which is there is real value to being able to walk out your front door and get a cup of coffee, or be able, you know, and then go to the park or whatever. And I think it's, you know, some cities haven't. I actually, there aren't many cities that haven't had it. I just did a DRI in Rochester, you know, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. We work on behalf of the state, sort of doing due diligence on projects for different cities. And we just were in Rochester, New York. And, you know, when I was in Rochester, New York over a decade ago, there wasn't much happening downtown. the same thing is happening there. There's renewed interest in downtown living. And yes, I think it's not just, rents don't go up if occupancy is going down, right? The idea is
I
you're,
want to be sure that I saw the connection, but you're.
Yeah.
I understand. Yep.
it means the way I interpret it is that you're becoming more valuable, you know what I mean, to the market. So that's how and so those are good signs. I see we have a spill. Okay.
Luckily, it was
It was
just water,
just
and
water.
phones were almost out of the way. I do want to say in relation to that, and I think most of the folks around this table know, and it's a conversation that we've had in the market studies, came back from the retail, commercial, industrial, and residential studies, where when we talk about there being demand here and occupancy being strong, we want to clarify, and it's not something we shout from the rooftops often. We've had a great marketing strategy. We're not a hot market, despite the demand that we have here. It is a modest level of growth. We've been trying to capture as much of that demand as we can. That's how we've been off of that, through having feet on the streets and services and retail and being able to attract players. The challenge when we do an exercise like this, when we're running sensitivity on some project financials, is there is a limit to what the market will pay.
Yeah.
No matter how much demand there is, that demand is all tiers of the income spectrum, where we have to make sure that a project's operating revenue can match and outpace its operating expenses. When you can only raise rents so high to be able to get there, and there are portions of the market that aren't going to be able to meet that rent. So I do want to be careful about talking about how much demand that there is, and people do want to be here. We've been really strategic about trying to capture as much of that market as possible, but without an opportunity to bring down operating expenses, those operating revenues need to keep pace with that. So that's part of our role, and the idea is to ensure that we're bringing down the operating expenses enough to allow rents to stay where our market dictates that they stay. We can't just keep sort of increasing rents because they won't get built because they're not built. So there is a balance when we're talking about demand. That's part of what the role is around this table, is to do as much as we can to help find that balance.
Are we seeing any, I don't know, psychology is not the right word, of people who are perfectly happy to rent across the river in Rensselaer as opposed to Albany, up the river to Hose or wherever else apartments can be built more cheaply? Is there some sort of psychological willingness of people like, I don't care about what's built across the river in the suburbs, I'm going to live in Albany here and I don't care what it costs?
There is definitely a market, and we've seen that, whether it's the impact done. And I'm sure Sarah can talk to articles that come out nationally all the time. The mentality of people who want to be in the middle of the action, who want to, walk to work environment. So there's a portion of the market. I do always come back to our average commute time to work here in Albany. Insane compared to the rest of the country, right? So, to be able to be.
It's too long.
The traffic, yeah, exactly. For 20 minutes, when you're talking about, lifestyle and being close to the action, to be able to get to a show at the Palace or, something at the arena, or to be at work in 20 minutes, that isn't the same as sort of mentality barrier as if you had an hour commute to work and to come in. We don't, if you're talking about apartments across the river, apartments in wherever, it's not the same barrier where you would be talking about urban versus urban.
I really agree. And Sarah, I'm happy you brought up the point about the rents, because I'm happy that the rents have gone up, but our rents are relatively modest. You know what I mean? It's not like we're I mean, we're still in a position where you're not going to be paying for structured parking. You know, I mean, it's our rents can, even though they've gone up, they're still they're challenging because you can only go so high. And then, but our costs are what the costs are, and our taxes are what the taxes are. And the IDA tries to help with the tax part. But that's what we're here to do, is really understand where's the sweet spot in trying to make it an attractive investment opportunity, and at the same time, try to drive as much taxes as we can to the city. And that's, you know, that's what our job is in this particular assignment, as I understand it. Yeah.
Uh, Just in terms of next steps, I mean, we are working to refine all of these various scenarios and come back to the committee with some recommendations. Parallel path, we're looking at all solutions with WZHA. Well, last path, we are looking at this framework and also sort of we expect that would be out of months. The only other thing I do want to say is that sort of while we're in this review phase, and at this point before, there are the economics have changed. So we are still getting interest and applications that will be coming through the process, and we're sort of in this little bit of a weird period because you know, the framework was set up in one way, the economics have changed, so the answers are becoming a little bit different. So, like, here's the framework, it's a sort of guidance, but you would be sort of open to what sort of the projects are.
Let's come back around and talk about that at the end. Possibly today. If there's something else for Sarah before we turn.
I'm sorry, Sarah, what I can't really hear you. So did you say something that I should respond to?
No, I think it's more for the committee if there's any, if there are any further questions for you before we.
Oh, okay.
Or if there's anything else that you want to add that you feel we haven't talked about yet this morning.
No, look forward to continuing to work with you all.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. This is
Thank you.
I have the pleasure of listening to listen, and every time I look, thank you very much for the time.
Right. So I'll sign off. Is that the idea? Okay. Thank you. Have a good morning.
Yeah, exactly. No.
It's been a real pleasure. So we do have some definitions at the last meeting, there were a number of definitions that were you know, some new concepts. I could take a crack at justice areas, but we did sort of want to comb through all of the so the first one that came up last meeting was minority women-owned business enterprise, disadvantaged business enterprise. Definition that you see here is the definition that we currently have. And we just want to open up discussion about that might be warranted in this from this one thing, because I saw here is that call out sort of state and federal participation. We don't have this the city of Albany. We may want to consider adding. Yeah.
speak to those, the state services that. That is, one thing. Yeah, it's fun. Yep, that's what it's saying. And it's also about.
State and federal.
Yep.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see, so as just a refresher, Sarah works with us on all of the financial. Scoring system that is in front of that. So sort of mirrors, right, the top of the, that almost for lack of a better word, sort of both categories, they are baked into how to get to that. So on the calibration side, instead of these being worth 1 point each, we do them worth 2 points each. As we calibrate the scoring system, we haven't started that yet to go back to the assessment. That actually is a little bit mind numbing in the best way of trying to figure out, you know, to remember it's comparable point, you know, is $1 million worth of investment worth 10 jobs, is, you know, rehabbing a historic building worth the same as being a cluster, an economic cluster, you know, being able to do that in a way that will do that as for previous projects. So where these might not get you to that next tier of pilot, they may get you extra points.
Moving on to regional labor. Definition is percent construction job filled by. This is one that we've seen a lot of projects. Prior to getting into this, you know, there was a thought of trying to make this a baseline. But
We're going to see if we can prove ourselves wrong. We think that's probably going to be possible, but again, given all of keeping it off the table yet, but that's likely one that you would see. Because most people do it.
next one came up as in the discussion in March, which was new labor. Out there, that's 50% construction jobs that be filled by local state investments. All of our
That 15%.
Experienced developers are having much fun establish relationship with contractors. That 15% certain function tracking
So you're set to already reach.
Next one, Catalyst, this is the. This one is probably the most flexible. Flooding issues here. This is kind of right. Additional, sort of going above and beyond, but this is one that it's very broad in some ways, and that's good. You know, it could be tighter if we wanted it to be. It's been very comfortable. Trying to find sort of
Document that.
So, an example of just stepping back historically, as more loosely interpreted, points for, especially by the applicants, and we've been really trying to narrow it down and tighten the definition of that. An example of somebody who's construction project, it's their Hackett on Hackett Boulevard. What we did was we looked at a lot of the core extras that project was doing. That was, installed two additional 1,000-gallon underwater storage tanks to help some of the flooding there. They are, if they have extending the sidewalk, also installing crosswalks that are adjacent to the charter school across the street. So we looked at just different things. What they did was they lined up at least two of those lined up. Two things. There was some storms were issues that were called out. So we're trying to make sure that this aligns with specific things that were called out.
In those particular instances, are those also being required by the voluntary activity?
At least those were voluntary.
Okay.
And I check to make sure both those tanks were required to be one.
Okay.
But if it's required, that's something else.
Yeah.
If it's required, it's required.
Yeah, it's part of site plan approval. I don't know if
Correct.
getting credit for it is appropriate, but yeah.
That's something we can set to the flip side of that. Project doesn't happen. So that's where, if it's mitigating as required, that might be something that we look at. The stormwater improvements we were making were not going to be taken care of, but also flooding issues that we're currently having on Hackett Boulevard. So that might be an area where we might have more language in the definition.
Certainly, I think it's good to have this in there, but I think. First, I think we actually incentivize people to, first. But also, it's with people saying, oh, wow, that beyond. That's beyond just the idea. Benefits of that. The more we can do to kind of build in some of these parameters.
Something beyond or something that wasn't there previously.
Yeah,
And not required.
and not required, yeah.
For site plan approval or as
Yeah.
part of a seeker mitigation.
Something like that will, I think, it will not only show value, it will show. Well, not just the fact that we're careful, but also show. I think I think that will help to, in a broader way, show.
Gotta go back to before.
Oh.
Yeah, I was wondering if
That
that
was-
was one of those purpose, not on purpose.
Your brain is on.
Yeah,
It's on.
I just blanked it right out.
I'm sick of this one.
So this one, so we can, you know, since the framework was created, we've had an inclusionary housing point. And that's defined as 10% of. In a rented to low-income households, it's defined. As HUD, this was developed, I think, around the same time when it was 5%. And that was double that amount. Now we're going to see projects that are required to have potentially 7%. And so really just wanted to kind of have a discussion about what makes sense with this. Question typically seen will probably.
So just a couple of. How, you know, I've been talking to various ad nauseam with the council as well, and you know, essentially what the legislation has done, we talk about to provide the system to match as much as possible the revenue impact there. Really, the council has sort of chosen our community commitment package for our projects going forward. That's I think the performance stand, and so by having that requirement in there, it's almost like having projects come through, and that is 100% guaranteed. Yeah, like, you know, they're not necessarily able to choose the MWBE or the City of Albany Labor. It's really focused on inclusionary. So, you know, that's fine, but that means what do we do with our so a couple of things to throw out. One, it's possible that isn't attainable as a gesture in case, or you know, there's or do we tie it and tie it to double what previous policy was. If someone is able to double the fact that they achieve, all given the caveat that extra points get is it something that comes out entirely because you know, is while pushing for or if there might be other ideas, if those are.
Just one sort of minor.
What is the income? What is the income line that you're here? I know there's a lot of back and forth with the council. You know, 100% of
The last time I remember.
Part 60% for individual. Okay. So it wasn't the county, it's the MSA for that, and so that's what makes it a little bit.
Okay.
A little bit different. And so it's the reason that we're not able to just sort of raffle them right from the month is it does go by household size. So there's a number for single household, 2-person, 3-person, 4-person. So the council limits it was in that 44 to 45,000 household for at the
Yeah, the legislation.
and so I this was one of the things household I think my suggestion would be make it match what the city has adopted so that people aren't sort of playing different rules and so, you know, I think if we were to keep it, we would go with upwards of 2 individuals making 60%.
But I, oh, sorry. Well, I think what it has, they labor pieces. You said that was- There's two things. One, if there's. That actually open us problems. And it's- If it's concerned where we see this. That's my initial.
Sort of erroneous they kept coming up. Like, look, no one chose to do this, so people aren't going to do this unless we make them. The reason that they were choosing not to do this was because it was too far for the project. And so if we're setting up, you know, just to be able to have something in here, double the existing policy, we know that that's a financial bridge too far. We know when we bring this 5 years from now, we're going to be in a similar situation. That's because it isn't financial. So we'll run the numbers and
And then the next two came out of the discussion last time. The first one is environmental sustainability. Going back to, I think it was 20, had some conversations with all the sustainability. At the time, they proposed the concept of having some kind of community. So what you see here is recommendations from the Sustainability Advisory Committee. We've added a 6th one for others. Discussion. What potentially makes sense.
Just because I am the environmental justice area. I saw this more as being in another category on top of an all electric building. I don't, it's more environmental justice. Not what I was thinking, more of a clean building to support, you know, the impacts that generally happen to create an environmental justice. Buildings lower greenhouse gas emissions, putting that into an environmental justice area. You know what I'm saying?
I like the idea though of taking those as 2 separate concepts.
Okay.
Because with on environmental sustainability discussion side, we've talked previously about, is it one of these things? Is it doing multiple of these things? You know, how do we get there? And so being the all electric building in EJ area, that's the definition of what would potentially be down to the environmental when you look at that map, that check right, that's a really great map of where we should be. There's been a lot of conversation. Where we are doing everything we can to frankly environmental areas. And so that may be sort of a second thought of, is that that check map of where I think we would really want to right. So there may be value in looking at above and beyond the sort of adding geographically road make. So that's where we were coming from.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to, it was just when I saw this, because that was my thought of just clean, healthier buildings in the environmental justice area. Was my initial thought on that, but I completely understand what you're saying, but it is a map that we're not investing.
You know, we see this could be a target geography criteria, and we added that section, it could be community commitment. You know, Posing it and Sarah's finding.
I think too, I think like having both environmental sustainability and for environmental justice, whether it's in another county where, you know, as long as they're separate, we aren't specifically separate to it. It's not like one, but I think having them separate. I think there can be a public perception sometimes, I think, share this, but people viewing environmental sustainability to impose costs. There is a sentiment of people, and I think to allow that environmental justice separate is beneficial. So from just environmental sustainability will help to correct that, because we're recognizing that every year there are areas where we really need investment and to further incentivize that. So yeah, to your point, I can go a long way with this. So from a legit, I think even yeah. So that's.
So Liz, though, going back to your point on, would you amend the development as all in?
But okay, well, we want all electric buildings, you know, in advance of what passed last night. But if there is an additional point, or if it's structured for an environmental justice, because it would, you know, check two boxes of healthier buildings, but also a geographic target. There's also too, is there a way we could do like a percentage of parking requirement? Yeah.
Small.
2026.
Most of our projects will be in that small.
Sure, sorry, it's all new construction for zero on-site greenhouse gas emissions. Part of the budget last night, small buildings starting in 2026, large buildings starting in 2029. There is language in there for exceptions to that. It's honestly. We lost a little bit last night after that passed.
No gas.
No gas connections, yes, with so it is new buildings under 7 stories starting in 2026, with larger buildings covered in 2029. There are restrictions and exemptions that are within the budget range.
And so that makes it number 4 on the all makes sense for the next 2.5 years. And then we'll probably, but people won't be using it going forward because they'll need to. But for now, if we structure the definition of environmental sustainability as project does one or three or four or five, and you get the environmental. sustainability. So I think, you know, in addition to, are there other things that we want to include in that? You know, freight that will be bumping up to the car charging. Is there anything else in here that doesn't feel comparable to the other? Get cop out for that point. So that people all do two charging ports.
One or two panels on it together, weight, so that definitely should. Yeah. Question.
What exactly do you evaluate utilities?
Factor that into our analysis.
I think it's also a little bit of a philosophical question. We would need more for all buildings adopting that. If it was a given. The adoption level isn't there yet, so I think that we're at this point is to adopt the technology before it becomes, you know, mass size. And so that might be, you know, to your point, might be taken care of with so that it isn't just, you know, the very inexpensive, like put one panel on and but it's for installing the full system. Take care of that. So we'll dive into that just a little bit at this point for the adoption. You know, similar to the all electric, in 3 years won't make sense to have on this list. Maybe in 3 years solar will make sense to have.
You're not gonna trust me, I don't want to.
You're coming out as the pro solar, why isn't everybody doing it?
It's a great question, particularly in terms of sort of what is the payoff period during the term of the system. So that's interesting. The other thing that's we're seeing is, you know, kind of ground source cooling. And so that's something that, you know, want to add to this definition.
The ground source heat pumps will be, it's gonna be part of the electric building. Kind of like the one system, adds any value.
Okay.
But the ground source heat pump would be part of it.
I was gonna say, I think solar is different than the grounding because there's often when you get into solar, there's usually a lot of times there's separate financing. And acquire those, and also there's some difference. More so yeah, I would agree with you, Liz.
So currently the definition says at least 2 of the following. Does that feel like it makes sense? Sorry, people to do this.
Yes,
So, is at least, no, it's great because it's stuff that we don't have. So does it feel right that it's at least 2? Should it be just 1 of the following? So, again, we're trying to balance having people be able to reach for something so that it's a benefit, but not putting the carrot too far away. So we can't
For now, I would be comfortable with you at least two, but I think I wanna think more about the percentages for the car charging and for solar. Depending on where we come out on that, I don't know if people will. they might take, solar and not. I'm just trying to think through it. I think, going all the way to an all electric building, would be for me, my preference and not to, but the steps of getting, solar and car charging, maybe that is just, we'll take. But I just want to see how we can flesh out, how many parking spots we have to be. Yeah, it's hard, and I think for the car charging parts, the car charging too, it just needs to take into account as well, other mandates that have no, combustion engine by 2030, I think, in the state, so the car charging ports will be necessary. It also can run your house on your car, if there's, power outage, so there's resiliency benefits there too, so having more than just two is probably something that people would do anyway. But yeah, just want to look at some of those numbers.
No, that's right. It's the difference between standard practice and we're at that tipping point of some of these starting to become standard practice. The spectrum of that should gain you a point. Great. So we'll look at this. And I was gonna move to finish off.
Okay, yeah, I'll stop. Is a white roof just a light reflecting roof? Is that the definition of it, or is something else other? Right.
It's like a
Then-
stormwater
Right.
mitigation,
Yeah,
yeah.
you recycle water, et cetera, whereas.
Like,
Yeah, really be across that.
Since we have a tier system where I can't go far to one of them and I can go all electric and green roofs might be kind of one and you get.
And I'm gonna throw another wrench in here, and I don't wanna be, with these in particular, like, do you have conversations with the, like, because you wanna put requirements in here that just don't go with zoning code.
Certainly, particularly on the parking requirement,
Yeah.
there may be a parking requirement already, so we can.
Yeah, I wouldn't wanna put something in here to try to get someone to get a point, and then they go to the planning board. Not allowed in the zone, or what you're trying to do, and adding a cost of now having to go get a variance, so just to make sure there's consistency with what can be done.
So in the rounding out the EJ area, we talked that beyond the conversation part. Students and calibration, so it might be hiding. where we want to be really focusing on.
We're going to begin operations. Back to you.
I do want to come back to Thomas. We're finding ourselves because of the inclusionary zoning legislation being passed and in fact now so that's a massive change. Interest rates are a massive change. We now are armed with a lot of data and a lot of information. So it's early work. So assuming that we have additional projects coming in, which we know that we're going to have at least half of the pipeline that we usually do, should be able to deliver the finish line. We're in a weird spot right now and sort of knowing reality, but having this as policy. So I would like to propose to be able to our touchstone and people say there are some things that are priorities here and we know we've got to stand by. But given the information that we have now, to for an interim go back to looking at projects individually. Guardrails using the market data, but being able to have a little bit of flexibility in looking at what that based on financial. So what we'd like to do is be able to recommend the board pre-approves third-party financial or applications coming and so we have and also just understand don't strictly adhere to what practice. It'll be very close, but it might be a goose instead of a duck. And so that that's just sort of the period that we're in now until we get back. So, if at all possible, for a recommendation to the board.
All in favor? Yeah, no, this was really fun. Nerding out.
Yeah.
Loving it.
We're actually doing a policy on this.
Yeah.
Really hard.
This has been really cool. Anything else from anybody?
Just a couple of questions. Are there projects in the pipeline right now that the new zoning is applied to, even though they're not, they haven't not process yet, but you know anything that's coming up?
So the answer is unclear. Magic 8 Ball is like
Right.
it is unclear and chicken again. So because the legislation is a little bit vague. But it's pretty vague. What people that have been either have applied to planning already for projects that people have for a long time. That we consider in the pipeline that doesn't necessarily have applications. So we do expect that this one project, let's call it 2 additional over the summer.
The Kaufman project in Broadway.
I would assume we haven't seen any detail
Oh.
related to that at all. So. And we don't know at this point whether the policy applies to that or any of the other projects that are out there. We do have a number of projects that have been previously those rules have expired. expired or close to expiration. So that, is that considered a new project if they're coming in just for reaffirmation of previous approvals? We don't know the answer.
More fun to come. What was the last thing we did a project that wasn't a park? Huh? Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, we're
Other
not,
than that, that was
we're
just,
not creating industrial land.
No.
here, so it's required, there is no commercial office market and residential is where it's at.
Quick question. for Mark.
We have the minimum bulk study, so we have a market study from CBRE.
Yep.
Through our local market now. The other third-party analysis that she had referenced, I don't know if it's a free service or if it's something that she probably pays for as part of her. We don't have access to that. She would be able to.
They're probably charging. Yeah, like 30 days.
30 days.
Yeah, it's cost me 6 months.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't do that unsubscription work, sorry. I have to get somebody else.
All right, any other questions? Well, thank you. As I said, look forward to continuing to work on it. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Everyone enjoy their weekend.
Take care, everyone. Take care.